And hello, young people, old people, and everybody somewhere in between. Good to be here. Good to see you. I'm Tad. I will be here till about 8 o'clock, and it's about 7 o'clock right now, California time, which is what I'm on and have been for most of my life. And that's probably not the only California thing I'm on that I've been on for most of my life, but it's definitely California time. No question about it. Hello. Good to see you. Nice of you to join me. I will be reading more from The Dirty Streets of Heaven tonight. All kinds of stuff going on. And in fact, we are moving now into the final phase of the book in which all kinds of things happen. So from here on out, it's going to be pretty much wall to wall adventure and excitement. Well, not precisely every moment, but we're getting there. Yes, it's certainly there were a lot of things we're going to get answers to, and a lot of other things that we will have to find out about in the hard way, as Bobby would put it. Yeah, you have to learn them the hard way. So anyway, what else is there? So we are just hanging out here in the Casa Beale Williams in Northern California, which, as I've pointed out several times, is not really Northern California. Really, everything above Los Angeles is considered to be Northern California, even though Los Angeles is down at the butt end of the state. But so, excuse me, we are like exactly in the middle. We are like exactly at the halfway point, just about. I'm referring to not just us personally, but the San Francisco Bay Area is pretty much right in the middle of the state. But because the South has got more people in it, they kind of tend to think that anything else is just kind of north. It's north of where the real state is, or something like that. Which I've that kind of thinking I've always found really weird. I remember from coming out of New York State into Pennsylvania and crossing, over into Pennsylvania and seeing a big sign by the side of the road that said, "The real America starts here." And I just thought that was one of the most bizarre ways I mean, yeah, it's one thing to be proud of your state, but it's another to imply that the state next to you, which is also one of the most populous states in the country and contains the biggest city in the country, but that's not really America. That irked me. Not least of which because it's kind of oftentimes, not necessarily in that case, but in most cases, that's kind of slang for, oh, we're not weirdos here. We're all, I don't know what, white Christians and we're normal. Believe me, I've got nothing against white Christians. I've got lots of white Christians in my family and friend group. But I do not like the implication that those are the only real Americans. That always pisses me off. Anyway, but as always, I am going to avoid politics. It's hard. It's hard these days, but I'm going to. Instead, I'm going to focus on the things that are close to home, and then I'm going to read. And what is close to home at the moment is our ongoing immersion. There's a good word. Our ongoing immersion in doghood, and trying to get our two dogs to get along with each other. And I had I haven't even said this to Deb yet. I meant to say this to her while we were out walking with one of the dogs. I had a major revelation today where I suddenly realized that I had made a profound misjudgment because I was really, I think, in a lot of ways, although Deb chose our new dog, Lemon, who is an absolute sweetie. So that was Deb's pick. But I was the one who pushed for getting another dog. And my reasoning was, we're going to be traveling this year, and Johnny's always lived with other dogs, and I don't want him to be a solitary, lonely dog, which seemed like perfectly good reasoning to me. And but anyway, I was just thinking about it today and thinking about the process we're going through of trying to get them to get along. And I mean, they're doing okay. They're doing okay. We are slowly but surely moving forward. They can be right near each other, and as long as we're distracting them a little bit with treats and stuff, they're okay. They can look at each other. They're not fighting or anything. Neither one has growled at the other one for a few weeks. which is, it's like having two young kids. It's that's in and of itself, as if neither one has taken their play school wooden train and thunked the other one over the head. You're doing okay. And that's pretty much where we're at with the dogs. But anyway, so I had this thought today. And I suddenly realized, Johnny did have other dogs that he lived with, but they were here when he got here, and he never really became friends with them. Not shocking, because of course, as I've mentioned many times over the last few years, Walter, the last of the other dogs of Johnny's elders, as it were, Walter was like 4 or 5 pounds, and Johnny's like 80 pounds, and they were okay. I mean, they didn't fight too much or anything. They were basically okay. And Johnny would occasionally get ticked off, and Walter would sometimes discipline Johnny, especially in the first year or two. But I suddenly realized, I went, Johnny, it's not like they were best buds or anything. That's my miscalculation, is Johnny might actually have been happier being a singular dog. I hope in the long run that does not prove to be true. And I hope that as they get together, that they will be buddies, or at least that they will be able to share space, and, there'll be benefits that come from that. If nothing else, going out and barking together at frightening things, night bunnies and murder squirrels and burglars and Kravis pumas and things like that upset them. They can share that joy of barking at bad stuff together, because they've both already shown separately that they're quite into that. But I realized that it's the one thing I hadn't thought about was, did Johnny actually seem to like having other dogs around? And I realized, actually, no, he's kind of always been a bit solitary. And so maybe I made a misjudgment. But this is how life works. And if that was the case, then, we just work around it and we go forward, because we're not sending the other dog back now. She's a sweetie. She's part of the family. Our family is kind of like one of those glue traps for mice or flypaper. We believe very strongly that once we get you, you're stuck, and you're part of it, and you're not going anywhere. And Lemon has definitely moved way past the beginner stage, and she is now very much part of the family, even if she and Johnny are still trying to figure out how the family works and all that. It's also been true for our young people and their friends as well. And I say this with all honesty, this is absolutely something. I mean, Deb also very much agrees with it. Deborah is very much that person. But I got it directly from my family, from my parents, who were always really big on saying, oh, bring them along. Do they have a place to go for Thanksgiving? Do they have a place to go for Christmas? Bring them along, have them come over, and my parents loved kind of pulling people in and including them and making a sort of bigger unit of things. And so I think both Deb and I have always felt very strongly about that. And it's also one of the reasons, and I will be reading, don't worry, but it's also one of the reasons that I never have used the word, for people who read my books, I have never referred to them as fans, at least not intentionally or not with any frequency, because I've always felt like if people like my books, I'd probably like them as people, and they'd probably like me as a person too. And whereas that whole concept of fan has a connotation of a separation. Now, obviously, you can't be friends with everybody. If you do what I do for a living, you can't be, friends, buddies with every single person who reads your books. I mean, then you'd have to choose between, not selling very many books to keep the number of friends down, or, spend your entire life trying to meet everybody who bought your books and see if they want to be your friend. That has, that's pretty clearly a non-starter. But I've never been comfortable with this idea of, having a whole group of people that are in this category of fandom. Not that I don't appreciate what's beneath it, that they enjoy my work, and some of them have met me and we got along and they thought I was an interesting person or whatever. I mean, that's all good. But I don't like this kind of fan thing where, there's an artist and then there are the fans, and they, because we're all fans of stuff, if that's how you want to phrase it. And if you say that, and if you look at it that way, then I can talk about it and be a little more comfortable with it, because we're all fans. I have people whose work I love, and some of them are alive still. Some of them I hope will be alive for a long time, and many of them may outlive me. So I've got nothing against enjoying people's work and wanting to support it and wanting to buy the things they make, or whatever your qualification for fandom is. But I don't particularly feel comfortable with that artificial thing of, I'm the important person, and you guys are out there to prop me up and make me feel good about myself, and support me without getting anything back from me, or only being allowed to purchase my creations or whatever. I don't know. I don't have a permanent finished thought on this. I just know that I've all my life, all my working life, I've always had a kind of a knee-jerk skin crawl at the idea of separating people because they like my work. They are my fans, like I have some ownership of them, or that I have certain rights that they don't have, or whereas what I have are the rights that anybody has, to privacy when I need it, and kindness and forbearing the rest of the time, and just all that stuff. Anyway, a lot of babble. But that's mostly because I don't have a lot else to say, so I just let myself swing wildly on that stuff. I'm working on Splintered Sun, as always. I finished doing all the tip-ins. I had to sign about 3,000 pages for the Grim Oak Press edition of The Navigator's Children, which is just about to come out, with a bunch of beautiful illustrations by Donato Giancola, and put together by Sean Speakman, which that's Grim Oak Press is Sean's, and those will be available, although I'm sure some of you kind people out there, who are interested in getting those have already pre-ordered. But anyway, so I've been signing pages, and now they're going off to Donato. So that took up a lot of the week. And yeah, just working and trying to figure out, I'm doing stuff with the downstairs now and beginning to order things that I need and think about how I'm going to arrange things, and do I need to buy new bookcases? So I use the ones we have in the garage, which, we've been carrying them around with us for years. I hate to have to buy something new just because, it will look better when I have perfectly good bookcases with shelves that will hold books out in the garage. But of course, getting anything out of our garage is extremely problematic. We had some people come over and did some work for us, cleaning work and stuff, and the gentleman was very kind, and he insisted on fixing some stuff up in the garage, and he did a wonderful job, but he basically pushed everything to one side of the garage, and it's mounded up, so half the garage is empty, and the other half looks like I don't know, like a climbing wall in a modern gym or something like that. It's just this huge pile of all boxes and stuff and things and old bicycles, and it reaches up to the garage ceiling. It's quite daunting. And of course I can't get anything. I was trying to find a copy of for the same gentleman who did that, who was really a sweetie, just a really nice man. And I was trying to find a copy of one of my Spanish language books for him, and realized that the way he'd arranged the garage, I couldn't find any of them. So I actually had to buy one. Anyway, enough is enough. Let me check in and see who is out there in Realityville, such as it is. And let's see who we got. We've got Ray Weatherford is the first one up on my list here, or at least the first comment that comes up. Medardo, el amigo mío. Good to see you, sir. A pleasure as always. Christy, hello. Emily, hello, hello. Good to see you too. Mark, that Mark is Mark Craigbaum, my old dear friend, with whom we plumbed the breadth and depth of the internet back in the 1980s, when it was neither very broad nor deep, but we did all kinds of amusing things on it. And someday I'll get Mark online, and we'll talk about the Lone Ranger and Tonto letters that we wrote to each other and shared with our friends. Claudia, hello, hello. Oh, crap, Claudia. I am so sorry to hear that. Claudia says that she got laid off from the National Institute of Health. Well, that just sucks. Again, I'm going to stay away from politics, but I'm really sorry to hear it. And I hope that things get better soon. Ugh. Okay. Anyway, so hello, Claudia, and I'm very sorry to hear it. Kelly, hello, Kelly. Good to see you. That's Kelly Kenrick. Mark, that's another Mark. This one is Mark Marino. Hello, and good evening to you. Tracy McClatchy is checking in from Michigan. Hello, hello. Susan Shamblin checking in also. Hello, hello, hello. And there's my buddy Ivan. Hello, good to see you. And as always, great pleasure to know that you are still out there in the world and we are still friends. Isaac, nice to have you with me as always. Mark, yet another Mark. This one, Mark Gambal. And by the way, Mark, I'm not 100% certain whether you emphasize the AL at the end of your name or if you pronounce it Gamble, because I'm sure that Cindy told me back in the day and heard it pronounced, but since we do much more interaction online and text, I can't remember. So if you want to remind me so I can make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Long as I've known you, I would like to be pronouncing your name correctly. Anyway, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Kristen is here. That's Kristen Rule. Good to have you. Barb Ann, lovely to see you. And who else have we got? Winter. Winter is checking in from New Zealand. You still in Wellington, sweetie? I hope so. Great city. And as in Vegas, Mark says, as in Vegas. Mark Gamble? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying the Gambal is pronounced Vegas? As in Vegas. Mark Gamble, I assume, is how he's saying it. But you can correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong. I'm frequently wrong. The older I get, the more pleasure I take in being able to say, guess what? I was wrong about that. It's very funny because the early part of my life, I spent a huge amount of time desperately afraid of being wrong about things because I had a great deal of my sense of self-worth that was tied up in the fact that I knew a lot of things and I read a lot and I was interested in a lot of things and I had kind of a wide fund of information to delve into, which used to mean something before Google, before the internet, before Wikipedia. Not that I, was ever claiming like I know this and no one else is as smart as me or anything like that. It's just that was a part of my sense of self, was the fact that I knew a lot of weird facts and some not so weird facts. And I always figured like, okay, I'm somebody who at least has an idea about a lot of things. And then as I got a little bit older, I realized what an immense amount of pressure to put on oneself to try to be right. And it's like, and especially when the information age exploded around me in the 90s and 2000s, I went, nobody has to be right anymore. We can go and look up 7 different sources and sift them and weigh them all and try and figure things out. And, you don't have to just know things anymore. And in fact, with the kinds of things that Deb and I particularly are interested in, which are science, biology, archaeology, cosmology, things change so quickly that you have to keep looking to experts. You have to keep monitoring how things are changing if you want to be aware of what's going on. We're fascinated by anthropology. There are discoveries being made every day. We're fascinated by, as I mentioned, cosmology. Discoveries made every day. So the idea that any person can know anything more than a sliver of anything about anything these days is completely ridiculous. So, and then I realized it's also, if you extend that willingness to admit you don't know to other things as well, like, you have an argument with a friend or your spouse or, your boss or your coworkers or whatever, being able to say, I have a different memory than you do, but my memory is not necessarily more trustworthy than anybody else's. So, let's just try and work something out. Let's try and figure out how we can go forward rather than arguing about who's right and who's wrong. Now, that said, I don't always succeed, but I do believe in that very strongly. that it's not important to be right. It's important to be willing and to be receptive. And I'm really working on that. And I will probably be super good at it when I pitch over dead. I will probably have just completely perfected the ability to try and work problems in the most positive and rational possible way. And as I realize that, I'll just pitch over. That'll be it. Anyway, but with that thought in mind, I am going to start reading because I've been babbling longer than I intended to. So we are reading about the Ralston Hotel, which is way out in the edge of the bay, big old hotel building. And Bobby, who knows that there's some vague connection between a very high-ranking demon named Prince Sitri, S-I-T-R-I, who has arrived at the hotel for this big conference with heaven and hell under the name Prince Sajatapandra. And he knows there's a connection between Sitri, that Sitri is a rival of Eligor's, and that Sitri, that Grasswax, the guy who got killed, the demon advocate who got killed, owed Sitri something. So he might have some involvement in the whole thing. So Bobby sees the gigantic mass of flesh that is Prince Sitri and runs over and kind of accosts him in the lobby. And in the course of the conversation, he mentions Eligor's name, and that's where I'll start because I just have a couple of sentences there that will take us into the next section. So you know Eligor, right? Says Bobby. Tall fellow, owns about 3/4 of this city.
Our host, you mean, Mr. Wald?
Fat Boy was suddenly smiling again.
Of course I know him. He owns this hotel too.
My expression must have amused him because he laughed again.
Oh, did you not know that?
I heard that, sorry, that changed the pagination.
Oh, did you not know that?
Eligor, the guy who wanted to murder me, if I was lucky, owned the Ralston. Now I felt like the grizzly bear was putting on his kiss the cook apron and firing up the barbecue. But I soldiered on. Yeah, that guy. I wondered if you might be able to tell me whether Grasswax might have stolen that something from Eligor with the hope of paying his debt to you.
Ah.
He nodded, or at least compressed some of his chins.
So you're not asking me whether I killed that punk Grasswax. You are asking me whether my dear friend and colleague, Grand Duke Eligor, might have killed him.
The manager was looking at his watch. He'd arranged the bejesus out of those flowers, and now he was getting nervously impatient again. I decided I'd already drawn enough potentially fatal attention to myself for one afternoon. Yeah, I guess so. And Sitri's lips writhed in distaste, like a pair of mating eels.
Grasswax was a fool who didn't know his limitations.
A large gray-blue tongue crawled out from between the sharp little white pickets and moistened those lips, making the long rubbery things look even more like sea creatures.
Anything that happened to him was richly deserved. He is not mourned or missed, and neither will you be, little angel.
Come along, Your Highness. It was the manager, bustling back into the midst of things as if invisibly signaled. I couldn't think of any way to dig myself in deeper, so I gave him my best jaunty salute. Right then, enjoy your stay. As I turned away, I could hear the freight elevator groan, indicating they had finally managed to maneuver Sitri into it. So now I had a few more pieces to play with. Sitri knew Grasswax, and I was sure he knew damn well why Grasswax had been so thoroughly dispatched. That was obvious. Now, demons lie constantly, but they also speak the truth if it suits them. His flabbiness hadn't minded talking about grasswax, which meant he either enjoyed the fact that Eligor's troubles were so well known, even if they reflected ever so slightly on himself, or he was as innocent of wrongdoing as a demon prince can ever be, at least in the case of Grasswax's messy and extremely painful death. Or he might have felt certain he was talking to a dead man, so he didn't need to be too coy. I couldn't find much to cheer about in any of those possibilities, and the whole thing hadn't got me closer to anything important, just guaranteed that yet one more of the nastiest bastards in this or any other universe was now thinking about me and my nosy nature. Good one, Bobby. Chapter 31. Something to my advantage. I hadn't even made it back across the lobby to the guest elevators when a handful of steely fingers closed on my arm. Startled, I clawed in my pocket for my concealed automatic, even as I turned. Reflexes aside, I knew nobody was likely to attack me in the middle of the biggest summit for decades, but I was still relieved, slightly, to see that the person who'd stopped me was from my side, at least as far as I knew. The angel holding my arm had the tanned, fit look of a mid-career military aviator. In fact, everything about him looked military. The creases in his expensive charcoal gray suit so sharp that it might as well have been a dress uniform. "Slow down, son," he said, and the iron grasp of his fingers made certain I did what he suggested. I had never seen him wearing flesh, and in fact had only seen him once in any form, but I hazarded a guess. "Cariel?" He didn't bother to acknowledge it. "I saw your report. You're testifying tomorrow, but I want to chat with you ahead of time." The way he said chat made me think of rubber truncheons and other painful methods of ensuring team play, but I think that was just his style. "Now you've seen how hard these bastards will work to cover their tracks, to make it look like the breakdown is on our side." I looked around, worried about eavesdroppers, but if Cariel wasn't worried, I decided I shouldn't be either. This guy had been fighting the opposition since before the seventh day. He must know what he was doing. In fact, that was what was worrying me more than any demons listening in. Still, I lowered my voice. "Hold on. You're saying that this whole third way thing is a front? That the other side have been pilfering the souls and that's their cover?" He frowned, like I was a school kid who'd just spelled CATT. "I'm saying that we give them nothing for free, and that includes this conference. Tell the truth about what you saw when the first soul went missing, but don't go overboard. Don't give them anything else, unless you have to." Nothing like directions from the top, so vague that no matter what happened, it was still going to be my fault. I'm not an idiot, though, at least not most of the time, and I wasn't going to argue with him about it in the middle of the Ralston lobby. In fact, I wasn't going to argue with him at all. That's one of the more pointless ways to spend your time with a higher angel. "Of course," was what I said. "Can we go over it before I have to stand up in front of everybody?" He nodded. "Excellent. Breakfast at 0800 local time. In that restaurant there. Are you paying attention, son?" I had to tear my eyes away from his shoes, which were so shiny and deep black, I thought I could actually see gravity bending inward around them. 0800. I checked the sign. Café Belmont. He looked my civilian clothes up and down. After the week I'd had, there might have been a few stains. "You're not going to wear that, are you? We represent heaven, son, the highest." "I have a suit." "Good." He paused as if considering what to say next. After the sniper-like efficiency and speed of his previous conversation, it almost seemed out of character. "I've been checking up on you, Angel Deloriel." How many ways could I dislike that? Several, just off the top of my head. "Oh?" "I hear that you were trained by Archangel Leo Locagos out at Camp Zion. If you are one of Leo's boys, that's a heck of a pedigree." Yes. This paragon, this uber leader of the angelic hosts, had known Leo? My Leo? He was a good one. Significant pause. I worked with him more than once. Cariel made work, which in this case almost certainly meant war, sound like the most glorious thing an angel could do, which I suppose for him it was. We should never have lost him that way. He finally let go of my arm. See you at 0800. Remember, you're not just an angel. You were a harp. That means something. Don't let me see you wearing that piece of shit. I stared after him as he walked away, measured and straight as an architect's tools. He was by no means one of the biggest bodies in the room, and certainly there were quite a few who were way uglier, but I wouldn't have wanted him angry with me for any money. But what the hell had that been about Leo? Long dead now and beyond resurrection. A hint? A warning? In either case, my arm still tingled where Cariel, master of demons, had no doubt crushed several thousand capillaries beneath his righteous fingers. Although Cariel's mortal body had looked pretty much like I'd have guessed it would, it was still a strange sensation to see him and so many other important angels wearing flesh. They don't show up down here very often. Almost never. The lords of hell love to spend time on Earth, of course. If your home decor prominently featured rivers of lava, pits of molten human feces, and the constant shrieks of the tormented, you'd probably spend most of your time at the office, too. But the big angels were usually, excuse the pun, above such things. You saw them on the other side of the zippers, of course, but they didn't have to embody themselves there. I glanced around the lobby as I hurried to the elevator, anxious to avoid any more meetings, but I didn't recognize any of the faces around me. This did not break my heart. My room was reasonably nice, although someone seemed to have gone out of their way to push the walls closer together than in a normal hotel room. It was hard to squeeze between the end of the bed and the cabinet that the television sat on without turning sideways. But I was so happy I was going to be in the same place for 2 nights in a row that it didn't bother me. The Ralstons' decor was Gilded Age, molded ceilings, ornate overstuffed furniture, and a headboard on the bed so lumpy with carved roses that I had to pile all the pillows against it just so I could sit up comfortably. I wanted to go back down to that lobby about as much as Dante probably wanted to go back to the Inferno, but it was almost dinner time, and I was beginning to get hungry. I ordered some nachos from room service, then turned on the television and watched the news. Sometimes it's oddly relaxing to watch shit happening to other people. Not to mention that when you know there's life after death, you don't feel like such a jerk about doing it. About the time the nachos should have arrived, somebody knocked on the door. Your friend, Bobby Dollar, is no fool. I put it on the chain before I opened. It was Sam. I was actually a bit surprised to see him. I was hoping to come in and get out of the decor, he said, but I see you've got it in here too. How did you find my room? I would have thought the security would be pretty fierce around here, considering what's going on this weekend. He gave me a look. Suspicious much? Don't moisten your pants, Alice told me. Great. She'd probably do the same if Hell's Horned Avenger asked too, but I was at least a little relieved. Obviously, if I was in Eligor's hotel, I wasn't going to be able to hide from him, but I was hoping any casual acquaintances with a grudge might have to work a little to find out where exactly I was. I should have hung a soap on a rope over the doorway to help keep creatures like you at bay. I was joking, of course, but I also couldn't help noticing that Sam looked a little rough. His suit was badly wrinkled, his bruises and scars were still painfully apparent, and his shoulders had a slumped angle I wasn't used to seeing. He made his way in and rifled the minibar, coming away with a can of ginger ale. He took the room's one chair and put his feet up on the desk. So what's the good word, B? Did you clock all the horns down in the lobby? It's like a metal band's wet dream down there. My nachos came, and Sam helped me eat some of them, but without his usual gusto. We talked about my conversation with Citri and the unwelcome news that the hotel belonged to Eligor the Horseman, Grand Duke of Hell, a name not exactly synonymous with hospitality. The big guys have to know that the hotel belongs to him, Sam said, sucking the guacamole off a chip before putting it in his mouth. Maybe they rotate. This conference at Eligor's place, next one at the Vatican or Dollywood. I wasn't going to be distracted by jokes. No offense, Sam, but you look like shit. I'm worried about you. I almost asked him if he'd fallen off the wagon. Ginger ale notwithstanding, but that's not the kind of thing I'd feel comfortable asking, even Sam. Still, he had an air of defeat about him that I hadn't seen lately. Maybe ever. And at a time like this, it really worried me. Anything you want to talk about? Seriously? I could see him halfway to brushing me off, but then he stopped and gave me a long look. What do you mean, worried about me? You haven't been your old self since they saddled you with Clarence. Like something's bugging you. It was hard to confront him. I was basically accusing my best friend of lying to me. We're deep into some scary shit, Sam. Worse than in the old days. If you know something that I don't, it's time to tell me. Sam sighed. That was odd. I don't think I'd ever heard him do that before. Yeah, there is something bugging me, Bobby. And you're right. I haven't been all the way square with you. If you've ever demanded to know... If you've ever demanded to know whether your significant other was sleeping with someone else, you will understand the ambivalence I was feeling now. I had really hoped Sam would deny it and make me believe it. I didn't say anything, just looked at him, waiting, my stomach heavy as a rock. You were right about the kid, he said at last. I don't know the details. What I said about asking around in records is true, but he's definitely working for somebody on the sly, and he's interested in you. In me? Why? I let it filter for a moment. Hold on, you mean the kid was sent to spy on me? And you went along with it? You were the one who asked me to take him off your hands. Hold on, B, hold on. I didn't know it then. I thought he was sent to keep tabs on me. I asked you to take him because I wanted to find out what he'd do when I wasn't around, what kind of questions he'd ask. I only found out later that you were the one he was after. I couldn't make any sense out of it. In fact, the whole conversation seemed a bit like a dream, full of twists and turns and non-logic. Why should the kid be watching me? And what do you mean you found out? Sam looked embarrassed. Well, actually, Temuel told me. Apparently, he made some inquiries of his own and then got told to lay off, that it was you the higher-ups were interested in and the mules shouldn't interfere. As to why they're interested in you, hell, I don't know. I sat back in my chair. I felt like I had been punched. So our bosses sent Clarence to get the dirt on me? I wanted to go and find the kid, give his Dockers-clad ass a good kicking. Shit, what did I do? You're a nice man, Dollar, but a lousy angel. Sam stood up. Think about it. You said yourself this is a conspiracy, so maybe this little inquiry isn't official. Maybe whoever put the kid onto you is trying to cover his own angelic ass for something. It could even be Temuel pulling a fast one on both of us. Or maybe whoever engineered this missing souls thing is looking for a fall guy, and I've been elected. After all, it wouldn't take much to make Carlisle and the rest believe I'd gone rogue. I had a sudden urge to hole up somewhere, maybe not even in San Judas, and just stay that way until Judgment Day. Maybe longer. I was that sick of all this spy caper bullshit. Nah, he'll be okay. Sam downed the rest of his ginger ale. I'm pretty sure this crap is going on all the time in heaven, Bobby, whether you and I know it or not. You try to figure out what's going on over our heads, you'll go crazy. I couldn't process it all yet. I'd need time to figure out how this new information fit in. But time was one thing I didn't have much of. And you're sure you want to stick around while I'm being fitted for a frame-up? Not to mention that I'm Eligor's target of choice? Are you even up to it? Because I wasn't joking earlier. You look terrible, Sam. He waved his hand as he got up. Hey, I'm fine, fit, and sober. Okay, not fit. The thrashing from that red-hot bruiser of yours makes me feel like I'm about 200 years old. I think after the Inquisition, the summit conference is over. I'm going to take a couple of weeks off and get better before I go back to the grind. Sam was one of those guys who'd respond to losing a finger in a chainsaw accident with, well, at least I can hawk one of my rings, so I knew he must really be hurting. Look, I told him, I'm not going downstairs tonight, and I know you don't like to hang out in bars anyway, so why don't you just stick around? We'll watch some porn and charge it to the office. He smiled, the first time he'd looked like his regular ugly self in a while. Nice idea, but I got a room of my own, and I get dirty movies there too. Phone me if you need me. I'm going to crash. He paused in the doorway. Preston's show looked good. I think it's even in 3D. Don't get your eye poked out. After Sam had gone, I put the chain back on the door and prepared for a night in. Unlike my best friend, I have no wagon upon which I have to remain. So I found a couple of little bottles of vodka in the minibar and some orange juice and retired to my bed and its bumpy headboard. My brain was too full of weirdness to watch anything in a serious way. I channel surfed, drank iceless screwdrivers, and tried to figure out how I'd landed myself in so much trouble. Latest information piled now on top of earlier unanswered questions. I did my best to find the disinterested, calm state where thinking happened without me trying to make it so. I sort of got there, but things swirled in my head like one of those money-tube game shows. Every idea a dollar bill, and for all my grabbing, I felt sure I was still going home broke. The Clarence stuff made no sense at all. The kid had been dropped on us before the souls even started vanishing. Before I met Kaz, too. But if Edward Walker and the rest of the MIAs wasn't the issue, and Clarence's arrival predated my relationship with the Countess, why had anyone upstairs suddenly become interested in me? It wasn't like I had just started slacking, complaining, and taking the Lord's name in vain last week. No, I just wasn't ready to make any guesses about that stuff yet. Sam's revelations about the kid hadn't answered any of my other questions either, and I still had a ton. Where had Eligor's feather gone? How was I going to stay ahead of the Galu? And did my new chum Prince Citri fit into this mess somewhere? Clearly the fat bastard didn't mind talking, but as with any demon, believing anything he said was like wearing an I'm with stupid t-shirt with the arrow pointing straight up at your own stupid face. Still, the one thing about demon lords is they hate each other almost as much as they hate us. More, sometimes. And Citri didn't seem to have much of a problem about getting into Eligor's shit. I was sure he was telling the truth about the ownership of the hotel. Why lie? But everything else had to be checked, or at least carefully considered. So, where did that leave me on the big questions? What did I know for certain? According to Kaz, Eligor had made a deal with someone in heaven, with the marker of that deal being a golden feather. That deal hadn't necessarily been about the missing souls and the third way, but it was an awfully big coincidence time-wise if it wasn't. Kaz's story, which I wanted to believe, of course, but not being a suicidal idiot had to take with a few grains of salt, was that she had stolen the feather from Eligor as protection, and then passed it on to Grasswax when things got hot. Howling Fell said Elagor had sent him to be Grasswax's bodyguard, which must have alarmed Grasswax quite a bit. Elagor was as much as telling him, "I know you've got it." The deal with Edward Walker's soul, or lack thereof, then went down, and by later that same day, Grasswax was dead in a very ugly manner that suggested he'd pissed someone off pretty thoroughly, or else that they'd wanted information badly, which supported Kaz's story. A short time later, I was entertaining visits from the Galu, which Kaz and Howling Fell had both confirmed was Elagor's fetch, and that suggested that Grasswax really had told the Grand Duke, probably while vomiting blood, that he gave the feather to me. Why me? Sure, Grasswax hadn't seemed to like me much, but pinning it on me still seemed pretty extreme when he must have known he wasn't going to survive being questioned by Elagor and his minions. I didn't have the feather, so who had he been protecting? Kaz? Didn't seem in character from a nasty piece of work like Prosecutor Grasswax. And now I had to fit our young friend Clarence into all this too. My bosses were spying on me for some reason. Why? Had one of them known that Walker's soul wasn't going to turn up and also knew I'd be on the case? That still didn't explain much. A sudden thought from earlier reoccurred to me. What if Elagor wasn't the only player? What if someone like Sitri wanted the feather too, to blackmail Elagor or whoever the feather belonged to? Could the Fat Prince have been the one who actually tortured Grasswax, trying to get in on the great plumage hunt? If so, Kaz was mistaken, or was lying to me, and so was Howling Fell. But it still didn't explain where the golden feather was now, or the weird thing my albino buddy Fox had told me about Elagor's prize. I smelled it on you. You can go crazy with this stuff. Wheels within wheels, as Sam put it. Is it any wonder every now and then that I have to stop thinking and just do something? And just to round it all out, I had found a connection between Elagor and Reverend Dr. Habari, the front man for the Magian Society. So what if this whole third way mess was some kind of massive deep cover fraud hell was putting over on us to disguise the fact that they'd found a way to Shanghai souls before they ever reached judgment? Or a private play for infernal power by Elagor, or Sitri, for that matter. Either way, the stakes were clearly high, because if Elagor was willing to let his hired demon smash up the compasses, he was obviously more worried about finding the feather than being discreet. And, of course, I had to deal with the possibility that the answer was none of the above, and that the Magians really did represent some fifth column in heaven, maybe even the first stages of an attempted coup. We hadn't had one of those get even close to success since the Lightbringer first tried to snatch the car keys and Daddy took the T-Bird away. Another such revolution from within would be way out of my league, and yet I was right in the middle of it and getting very little support or information from my bosses. As you can imagine, the word scapegoat kept coming back to me. It wasn't a word I liked. Kaz drifted through all these thoughts like a trail of smoke or a hint of some exotic perfume. Had she been using me to get herself off the hook, or to push some agenda I couldn't yet see? That was certainly within the character of her calling, but asking me to believe she had fooled me so completely was asking me to believe that I had learned nothing in all the eventful years of my angelic life, that I was as gullible as the newest halo fresh off the heavenly bus and had fallen in love with an unrepentant hell creature after we spent one night together. All these possibilities jostled around in my brain like cranky kids kept up too late. At last, I gave up trying to figure it all out in one night and called the office to check my conference schedule for Saturday and Sunday. I did not want to be asking Kariel rookie questions over our shared breakfast. The very thought of his handsome mouth curling in a little Clint Eastwood smirk of contempt at my helplessness made my scrotum climb to higher ground. Once Alice finished complaining about me, which took several minutes, I got what I needed, plus some information that surprised me a bit and which I put aside to chew over later. Then I called Fatback and left a message on his answering machine, since at this time of the day he would still be on the last train to Porksville, asking for whatever he could find about the Ralston Hotel, emphasis on escape routes, and also for some info about a few other things that had been troubling me. Since I'd finished the vodka and didn't want to wait for room service, I took 2 tiny bottles of Bacardi out of the minibar and began working on them. I still had some orange juice after all, and any sailor knows that when the weather ahead looks foul, it's time to break out the rum. I had been brooding and flipping channels for hours, letting bits of images and sound wash over me. Half an inning of a baseball game, some incomprehensible cop drama featuring corpses and forensic labs staffed by improbably good-looking scientists, a local weatherman doing his best to seem responsibly worried as he reported a tiny bit of incoming rain that might force a few folks to roll up their car windows, plus old movies, infomercials, children's cartoons that seemed to consist mainly of primary colors and loud shrieking, anything that would hold my attention for a few seconds. I finally found a program about soldier ants and even settled into it a little bit. I confess I might have dozed or been about to. Either way, the knock on the door startled me badly. One of Prince Citri's Easter Island statues blocked the space beyond the chain. For an instant, I could only wonder if the modest metal links would keep him out during the second or two it would take me to get to my coat, where it hung over the chair, and the automatic full of silver bullets in the pocket. But he only made a grunting noise and pushed something through the space between door and jamb. An envelope. When I took it, he turned and walked away, surprisingly quietly for a man big enough to have his own zip code. The envelope contained a note written on impossibly dainty, almost transparent paper in a finicky little hand that it was hard to feature as the product of Citri's immense, pudgy paws. If you come down to the lobby bar at midnight, you will learn something to your advantage, it read. At the bottom was a single florid letter S. I wondered why he hadn't just invited me to the Roosevelt suite. It didn't seem likely that Prince Jabba the Hutt and I would be able to have a surreptitious meeting in the crowded lobby even after midnight, but on the other hand, there'd be enough people around that it didn't seem likely he was going to bump me off either. I was already in the game and had pretty much bet my house, so I couldn't afford to ignore the summons. I pulled on my coat, but not before putting on my shoulder holster and making sure that I had a round chambered in my new FN automatic. Nobody wants to be the guy they say he forgot to load his gun about while shaking their heads grimly. I didn't encounter anything in the halls, but I heard enough weird sounds from behind doors to make me hope some local channel was showing slasher movies. The elevator was empty too, although I swear somebody had cranked up the air conditioning way beyond what was reasonable, and I had to suffer what felt like cold breath on the back of my neck all the way down to L. Signs and portents. Unfortunately, when you live in my world, they're as ubiquitous as advertising and even harder to sort through for truth. The lobby was still a busy place with all kinds of folks from my side and not my side going in and out, grouped in chatty little bunches, looking at a troop of obvious hellspawn laughing and smoking outside the front door. I wondered how many crimes under investigation by Interpol could have been solved merely by listening in on their cheerful conversation. The bar was full, but not crazy full. I stood for a moment in the doorway, looking around for either Citri or his bodyguards, but even with all the weird-looking people in the room, I didn't see any as weird as the prince. Then, at the corner of my eye, something bright caught my attention. She was sitting at the bar by herself, with her back to me, but Even without the fall of pale gold hair down her shoulders and back, I would have known that slender shape anywhere, anytime. She wore a black skirt that showed her fine, pale legs and a red cashmere sweater that clung to her like a second skin, displaying the delicate bumps of her spine like a topo map in scarlet. Before I could get a chance to tell myself it might be someone else, fruitlessly denying the knowledge that was throbbing in every nerve of my earthly body, she turned to the bartender, and I saw her face in silhouette. It was indeed the Countess of Cold Hands, her very own self, just as I had known from the first moment I spotted her. It was Kaz, and she was all alone, as if waiting for someone, as if waiting for me. And I'll start the next chapter, although I don't know how far I'll get. Chapter 32, Saddest Sound I Ever Heard. That was an intense couple of seconds, let me tell you. There she sat, staring at the mirror behind the bar, and it was like one of those movies where the single spotlight comes on and everything else goes dark. I couldn't see anything but her. I had been smothering my feelings so strenuously for the last 48 hours or so that the intense wave of longing that rolled through me almost made my knees buckle. She was so beautiful. Her face was perfect. No, not quite, I realized. That kind of perfection only exists after someone's used an airbrush on a photo, but Kaz came very close. Her only flaw, and it didn't seem like a flaw to me, was that her high-bridged, slender nose and her fine bones gave her a look of fragility, of something fierce that had known a cage, that knew it could be broken, and feared that beyond all else. She looked young, but also like she might not age well. She looked like she could be damaged, and probably would be. But still, my God, she was beautiful. And, in fact, she would never age, I suddenly realized. She would appear this way forever, or at least as long as it suited her. Casimira of the Cold Hands would never get any older than this, but that didn't mean much to me anyway. Chances were good that, one way or another, I wasn't going to get any older either. As I moved toward her, she seemed to sense my presence, or at least that she was being watched. I wasn't surprised. It seemed like I'd never stared at anything so intently in my short angelic life. I was so surprised to see her in the Ralston that for a moment I literally couldn't think of what to say. She turned and her eyes went wide. "Hello, Kaz," I managed to say. "Clever, huh? I'd like to see what you'd come up with under the circumstances." The look on her face seemed close to panic. "Bobby, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? What are you doing here?" I suddenly felt conspicuous, but if anyone in the bar was watching us, they were being cagey about it. "Why didn't you call me back?" Now that I stood in front of her, I was more than a little angry, but that was only part of the storm that was blowing my emotions this way and that. For those who don't know anything else, let me just tell you, it's really weird to live in a human body. You can feel the hormones pumping, feel the hide bristling, skin stretching and shrinking, feel yourself being tugged by fight or flight impulses like the animal that you are or were. I wanted to grab her, kiss her, drag her to my room, but just as powerfully, I wanted to shake her until tears came to those robin's egg blue eyes, make her feel how much I was hurting. Yet another part of me was terrified that one of Eligor's minions would spot her, and I'd have to decide between some kind of fatal standoff or else stand helplessly and watch them drag her back to the beast she had cheated, a creature that I already knew did not take losing well. And that's where I'm going to stop. Because, as I said, we just started that chapter. So, leaving it there, Let me just make sure. Ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. Okay. Anyway, so with that, I want to thank you all for joining me. It's always a great pleasure to spend time with y'all. And I do feel it. I feel you guys on the other end. I hope you feel something similar in whatever it is. I mean, I can't see you. You can at least see me. But I hope you understand that I feel you out there. I feel your vibe. Just in case you were wondering whether I was really a native Californian. Yes, I am a native Californian, and we do vibes. But anyway, so with all of that said, barring fire or flood or something else, I'm hoping we'll have the heat back on by then. I will be back next week to do my reading, 7 p.m. as usual, and before that, the 1 a.m. reading also. So until then, I beg you, I implore you to please take good care of yourselves. You are a small, select group of very kind, clever people with wonderful taste in literature, and I need you. So, first priority, take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, your family, your friends. Keep an eye out for those others around you who might need a little something too, a helping hand, a couple of bucks, kind word. Just, people that you see on the street who other people look away from, don't look away from them. Just make eye contact. Say hello. Tell them that you hope they have a good day. I mean, we're all in this together, folks. We are all in this together. So, with that said, I will wrap it up and say peace. Love you all. Take good care. Be well. And I will see you almost undoubtedly next week. Okay.